First, if you saw the first televised debate, I was on the debate stage. There were 8 of us on there. The moderator asked the question, do you believe that climate change is caused in part by human behavior? Y'all remember that? I was the only candidate that raised my hand. And so that sets me apart in and of itself, and shame on the moderators because they didn't delve into that question more deeply. They moved on. But that gives an honest answer as to where I am. Now, I want to make some adjustments in the strict timeline that President Biden has on the conversion to electric vehicles, on the push of consumers to go one direction. I think it has to be more gradual. I don't think all of the addressing of the climate change issues would be on the United States of America. We want to see China and other countries that take on responsibility there. In reference to the Mississippi River, first of all, I will, as president, make sure that the Mississippi River continues to be that channel of navigation, the channel of commerce that we need it to be for Middle America. For our farmers, it's critical, and for, it's harmful to us whenever we are shutting down barge traffic for a month because of flooding or because of some other issues there. And of course, that hurts not just our farmers, but our industrial base as well. There is responsibility on the adjoining landowners to make sure they conserve. My dad was a farmer. I grew up on the farm, and he taught me conservation practices to avoid soil erosion, to protect the land, and we have a responsibility of stewardship there. And so, I'm for encouraging good, appropriate action and conservation. We can provide some incentives. I'm not big on mandates, but there is a responsibility, and whether it's the Illinois River watershed, it's the Arkansas River, or whether it's the Mississippi River, we do have a responsibility there. The key is the Corps of Engineers as well, that we have to make sure they have the resources to keep those channels open and to make sure that they're dredged and that they have the resources that are needed. I've been to a couple different ethanol plants during the last 6 months here in Iowa. I support a pro-growth energy policy that includes the biofuels, it includes ethanol, it includes the alternatives that we use in Arkansas, such as solar. Here, wind is big, and so I support those all energy sources going into our mix. I also support the production of in environmentally sensitive ways, the oil and gas that is critical to our country. We're not ready to move away and abandon from that, and that's one of the things that President Biden has made a mistake at the very beginning by saying we're going to move away from oil production, and it was unrealistic. He paid a price for that. We as a country paid a price for that. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is still depleted. And so I expect to produce energy again, and the ethanol is a big part of that mix. The statistic I heard was actually 60% of the corn in Iowa goes toward ethanol production. And it's amazing how that's boosted the economy and the byproducts of corn and the unique ways that it can be used. And so I applaud that research. And I think what I will do to support the industry is to make sure that there's not an outdated or unnecessary restriction on summer sales of ethanol, and that we can increase the standards there. What is it, E15? And so those are the steps that I would take. And then the final part is the threat of ending the combustion engine. And that may happen, may not happen 30 years from now. I look at our farmers, I look at military. We need the combustion engine. Electric vehicle transportation is not going to work in many spheres. So I don't want an artificial push. I want to continue to develop technologies that make that work, but I expect the combustion engine to be a part of our future for some time, and that, of course, is important for our reason for ethanol production. When it comes to infrastructure, as governor, I passed the most significant infrastructure bill in the history of Arkansas, and I did it with, we call it the Governor's Highway Plan. It had my name on it, and we passed it during COVID, which was an extension of a permanent half-cent sales tax. So that's not easy in a conservative state. We got it passed by 55% of the vote with the people of our state who believed in infrastructure, and the American people understand the importance of it and how it drives our economy. And you know, there's one candidate for president that wants to revoke the gas tax, the federal gas tax. That's how we fund our highways, that's how we fund our infrastructure. And to say that we're going to revoke that, to me, borders on killing the economy. So I support that. One other thing, and I know I'm contrasting myself with candidates, but I think that's important. I've advocated a 10% reduction in non-defense federal workforce. And I do that because I believe it's a reasonable approach to it. But there's some candidates that want to do 75% reduction. And 10% is 200,000 reduction in workers. And actually, it was right in this area that influenced me to add the words non-defense workforce because of Rock Island and their defense workers there. It's very important for this community. And so we're taking it differently, and 10% is a reasonable reduction. And the reason you can't do much more than that, because you need to increase the Border Patrol, you need to make sure they're strong. Air traffic controllers is the reason I brought it up, because that has to do with our airports and commercial aviation. And we need those, and we can't be safe without that investment. So I have a very practical approach to all of these, constricting government, saving money, but at the same time not being unrealistic about it. I think if you talk to the candidates for president, I'm not sure anyone's going to say they supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I was chairman of the National Governors Association, and I brought bipartisan support for the infrastructure bill, and I supported it. And I also supported the CHIPS Act in the same way. And the bill that I didn't support was the Inflation Reduction Act. And so that's where I am on each of those bills. And my view is that I supported a bipartisan infrastructure bill when Trump was president. Why should I not support it when Biden is president? And so I brought in support for it. And so there is, I think, probably a number of candidates who will want to rescind some of that spending authority. I'm not going to rescind it on the infrastructure bill. You know, the Inflation Reduction Act is different. If it hasn't been spent, and if there's some COVID relief money that's still out there that we can bring back, I'd certainly look at that. But the infrastructure is important. I will maintain that commitment under the bipartisan infrastructure bill to support the core and the other projects that are included. Well, it is an issue whether you're in New Hampshire or in Iowa or in Arkansas. Affordable housing is a big issue. And whenever you look at I've got a son that's stuck at home. He can't move because the houses get too expensive, and he's got an expanding family. That's a typical story. So what do you do about it? And you've got to be careful about too much federal intervention, because a lot of these are private sector decisions. But it is important that we continue our programs that help in opportunity for first-time home buyers, that they can move from an apartment into a home, and we have specific loan programs for that purpose. I support those. Secondly, it is about reducing the interest rates that causes rent prices to go up. There's a terrible story when I was in Atlanta. Someone picked me up for an Uber drive, and she was on her lunch break from working at the hospital, and she was trying to make enough money for her rent payment. And she almost had tears in her eyes trying to make that before she got back to work. But So that's a story out there, and so it's the interest rates that drive up the mortgage cost, but it drives up the cost of our rental housing as well. And so you've got to address that, lower the interest rates, reduce the federal printing of money that we can't pay for, and those interest rates will go down. And then, as governor, of course, we had different affordable housing programs that we administered. They're very important. And I found that you had builders that they could build in one city, which really needed affordable housing, or they could build up in Northwest Arkansas, which is a growing area, very busy, growing population, and had more money. Where did they pick? They always picked the more thriving market. They could make money in both markets, but they picked the thriving market because they could make more. And so somehow we've got to incentivize and we've got to encourage the private sector to have more broad-based view and encourage those kind of investments in our rural communities. First of all, you have to be mindful of rural America, and that's a key principle. Every time I made a decision as governor, I thought about our rural schools, our rural health care, because I grew up in a town of 1,000 and then went to the larger city of Springdale, which was still a poultry town, but I grew up on the farm. And so I always had in mind when we develop policy, how does this bring us together? And so that's why whenever I had my computer science initiative, in which we're the first state to require computer science to be offered in every high school. And I said every high school because I wanted it to be offered to that young person in a small town in Arkansas. And we went from 1,100 students taking computer science in Arkansas to 23,000. And as president, I will advocate the same thing. Right now we only have 51% of our high schools that offer computer science, which means the 49% are probably located in those rural areas. And so I'm going to say we're going to increase computer science education so it's available in every high school. And that allows us to compete with China in technology and development. But how that benefits our rural communities is, I've said, if you have access to the internet and you know computer coding, you can be in your front porch in Davenport, Iowa, and run the world. You literally can work for a company in India, you could work for a company in Austin, and you can work for a company, or you can innovate and create your own businesses. That gives them the freedom, and that gives them the opportunity to live in their small communities and have a skill set that works in the global marketplace. Finally, on healthcare, we did the same thing. I expanded Medicaid in Arkansas, one of the few southern states that expanded Medicaid, and we did that with some conservative requirements in there, but it was allowed us to improve our maternal health care in our rural areas, our addiction counseling, and so every policy we did, whether health care or whether it was internet access or whether it's education, I was always mindful of those rural areas. And finally, it's about job creation. I have one fundamental principle as governor, and I'll have this as president. I want the private sector of the economy to grow faster than the government sector. And we did that in Arkansas, and that's the only way we're going to get out of our debt. But it also benefits our rural communities. And I see Iowa with agriculture being a dominant force, but your manufacturing base is critically important. And every manufacturing company you come in can't locate in every small town in Iowa. But it's a supply chain that benefits those small communities. I brought in 6 Hour to Arkansas, and brought into Jacksonville. They just hired 500 more workers, but I love the stories. In small communities around Arkansas, they say, yeah, thanks for bringing in 6 Hour because we got a subcontract and we're adding 20 employees in our small community. And so that's what you've got to remember and encourage in the business development, industrial development of those small communities. I want to bring in business and expand the private sector, and I know that that will benefit small communities as well.